911. What's your emergency?
Is this Canada 911? Okay, good. My name is Diver Dave. My cell number is 613-866-DIVE, and we have an unresponsive diver here at the water entry stairs of Centene Memorial Park, 85 Water Street East, Brockville, Ontario. We are providing care, oxygen, first aid, and CPR, but we need to get you here quickly. When was the last time that you planned to have emergency O2 available during one of your local shore dives? If the answer is never, then I'm going to ask the question, what if? Up next, we're going to talk all about emergency O2 and maybe how this little orange pod could be the difference maker in a DCS situation for you or your buddy. I'm Diver Dave. I'm still in the dive lab, and you know I've got coffee. Let's talk about it. Welcome back. And of course, today's topic is all about emergency O2 and how the RescuEAN Pod could potentially help you out. The question is, well, when do I really need O2? And I think the answer is always going to be dictated by Murphy, at least a little bit, that the day you need it the most is the day that you didn't bring it. And so why not just bring it every single time? I always have a 40 cubic foot of O2 in the back of my truck, just for emergencies for myself or my buddy, and in the past, that has proven to be a real valuable thing to do. The key question I have is, why don't more divers have O2 readily available when they're doing local shore dives? We have a ton of local shore dives here that get deep pretty quickly, and so having O2 readily available would probably be a good thing to do. So why don't we do it? Is it cost? Cost for sure plays a part, because the cost of a 40 cubic foot tank, the O2 itself, the first stage, the reg set, all of this, of course, is not cheap. Even the emergency square green box O2 kit is also not cheap. So I'm sure cost plays a part. But one thing I do know is that if you had come out of your dive or your buddy and you had some sort of severe DCS hit, the last thing you're going to be thinking about is cost. And if you had an O2 kit readily available, you're going to be pretty happy. So I'm not too sure cost is the right argument. Is it lack of awareness? I will admit that up until maybe 3 years ago, before I started taking my tech diving training, that I really wasn't aware that maybe I should have O2 available. I mean, I knew the charter boats had it, but I was still doing some pretty deep shore dives, but yet never really took the time to consider having O2 available just in case. So awareness could certainly be one thing, and it's one of the reasons why I thought I would make the video. Maybe it's the term normalization of deviance, which is something that gets thrown around a lot in the diving community. And you see it all the time. People are breaking the rules because they did something 100 times and nothing went wrong. But you always got to be careful about that 101st time, because you just don't know. Just because you did something 10 or 100 times and it didn't go wrong doesn't mean that it will continue not to go wrong. You just never know. So do it the right way. And like I said in the intro, details do matter. So again, normalization of deviance, I think on the O2 thing, it doesn't add up. How about convenience? You'll hear this all the time. You know, I hear it on the self-reliant. You know, Dave, carrying an extra pony tank, it's a pain in the ass. Well, I guess from a convenience perspective, hey, you know, Dave, having an extra big green box in my car or my truck, or a 40 cubic foot pony tank full of O2 that I've got to sort of pull in and out of the truck every time, that's a real pain in the ass. It's just something I don't want to do. But again, I just don't think that argument holds weight, because on that one occasion that you came out with a severe DCS hit, none of that is going to matter. And again, you'll be pretty happy knowing that you have that 40 cubic foot tank in the back of your truck or the emergency O2 kit readily available. The last point I hear on this is, Dave, I don't have the training in order to be able to provide O2. And my answer is always the same. Well, just go get the training. There are no prerequisites on the PADI side and the other agency sides in order to get your emergency O2 provider certification. So sign up, go get the training, and get certified, and now that excuse goes out the window. So to sum up sort of the areas of the why, is it cost, convenience? Is it training? Is it awareness? Is it normalization of deviance? I don't really know. And so I'm putting that question out to the community to say, hey, come on back, put some comments, give me some feedback, because I'd love to know. But to me, it seems like I've seen folks with some big DCS hits, and I know that every second counts. The faster you can get on O2 while you're waiting for EMS to arrive on site could be the difference between short and long-term DCS effects. So why not just invest in the training, invest in the gear, and that way you've got your bases covered in case you did have to deal with some sort of DCS hit. And last but not least, we're going to get into this really cool device called the RescuEAN O2 Pod. It's a UK-based company that sells and makes them. I've owned this for about 2 years, and we'll go into a much deeper dive further in the episode on how this thing works and why I think this should be in every diver's first aid kit. So stay tuned. So what's the problem? Well, the problem could be that we as divers spend so much time trying to be great divers that we forget about anything that's not really diving related. We tend to forget. And so things like emergency action plans or having O2 readily available, these are things that we kind of allow to fall to the wayside. But keep in mind, in a critical DCS event, EMS could be 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes away. These are precious minutes. And studies show that, the quicker you can get on O2 to treat a DCS event, the better it'll be in terms of short-term versus potentially long-term effects. And while we are really focused on the diving portion of our day, Murphy actually doesn't care whether it's diving or at the surface or on land. He doesn't really care. He's just waiting for any opportunity to come and join your dive day. So we have to plan for that. Before we can go any further, now we got to talk about the missing link. And the missing link is training. All of the dive agencies offer up some form of emergency O2 provider training. Some might have the course on their own, and it might be bundled into a first aid / CPR course. But if you've got the O2 on site, but you don't know how to use it or administer it correctly, then really what's the point? So we have to now get the training. PADI offers up an emergency O2 provider course on its own. There are no prerequisites, so you can literally be a new diver, go and take the course, become trained, get certified, and now you are ready to administer O2 correctly. So this is probably a very good next step. Let's take a moment to talk about the skills that you'll learn during the course. Number one is, of course, how to set up the O2 kit. I mean, that's pretty important. If you don't know that, well, we're not really moving on, are we? Number two is the differences between a on-demand and a continuous flow system and when to use them. Then we can talk about actually administering the mask or the regulator to a distressed diver. And then the last one would be how to work with an unconscious diver, administer O2 correctly and safely. These are all part of the course and are all key parts to learn. Last but not least, we need to talk about time commitment and cost. Time commitment, if it's just the emergency O2 provider course, is probably a half to a full day worth of your time, and cost-wise, somewhere in the $100 to $200 range. If you compare that to all of the money we spend and the time we put into this dive journey, that is really not a very big investment. I feel every diver should know how to administer O2 correctly. So take the course. Just make it happen. Okay, now we get to talk about and review and demo the O2 Pod. But before we go there, because I know there's going to be a few folks watching this and they're going to say things like, Dave, that pod is not meant to replace the official adult O2 kit that comes in the green box, which I'll post a picture here just to show everyone. My reply to that will be absolutely correct. This is not meant to replace, but it should be used as an alternative in case you do not have access to the official adult O2 emergency kit. But just to make sure we're all aligned, I'm going to read the official statement off the RescuEAN website. So I didn't want to memorize it, so I'm going to read it directly off the laptop. And this is what it says. The RescuEAN Pod was not developed to replace authorized adult emergency O2 kits. As in all cases of evolved gas disease, and regardless of symptoms, all cases of sudden cardiac arrest, all cases of drowning, all trauma, adult emergency O2 administration should be provided in accordance with current best clinical practice guidelines and issued by the following organizations in your home country. However, in some instances, the above may not be possible or available. It is then that the RescuEAN Pod is beneficial as an emergency alternative for providing gas mixtures with an increased fraction of inspired oxygen to injured divers who will benefit from increased oxygen partial pressures during resuscitation, stabilization, and evacuation to an appropriate medical facility, or while waiting for such evacuation to occur. So there we have it. That is the official statement. So now that we've got the disclaimer out the way, everyone's happy. Now let's talk about why this little pod is so cool. Welcome back, and now that we've got our close-up cam working, you can see that the O2 pod itself is actually quite small. It's really rugged. It's made out of, I think, a very durable ABS plastic. It has 2 ports that are protected by dust covers. You can see this port actually connects to your low-pressure inflator hose or your dry suit hose. And then, of course, this side will actually connect to either your on-demand or your continuous flow mask. In the middle, you can see now it's actually set to 0, but this entire barrel rotates. So now that would be a 15 liter per minute flow. And then, of course, if you needed a bit more flow, it actually also increases to 25 liters a minute. And we'll actually demo this next. But overall, very, very simple to use. It takes less than a minute to connect this all up. And of course, this fits really nice into your first aid kit. So there's really no excuse not to have this. Cost-wise, this thing comes in right around $150 to $175 Canadian. So, I mean, that's pretty affordable to have something that potentially allows you to access enriched air or even higher concentrations of O2 when you need it. The only issue I've had with this to date is that the Phillips screws here were a little loose, and I just had to sort of hand tighten them. Up next, we're actually going to demo the RescuEAN Pod just to show you how easy it is to connect into your either back gas or if you had a 40 cubic foot pony tank of O2 available. So stay tuned for that. Let's talk about scenario number 1. You and your buddy have just had an awesome shore dive, textbook, and now you've exited and are disassembling your gear, and unfortunately one of you is starting to feel signs of DCS. You alert EMS, but you're not sure how long that's going to take, and while you're waiting you realize, hey, both of our tanks have 32% nitrox in them. Now I just have to figure out how would I use it. And in the case of a conscious diver, you're obviously breathing. Well, you could just use your regulator and breathe from the reg. But that is not as efficient as using a free-flowing mask. And the second scenario of that would be if you or your buddy are unconscious but breathing, well, now you're certainly going to need a free-flowing mask because the on-demand regulator is just not going to work. And this is where the RescuEAN Pod really shows its value. So let's take a moment to show how easy it is to connect this all up. So number 1, we're going to make sure the tank valve is on. That's pretty self-explanatory. Number 2 is we're going to connect up the O2 side of the pod to the free-flowing mask. That is just a pretty simple press-fit connection, as you can see here. And then number 3 is this pod is driven by the low-pressure side of your first stage, so it can either be connected to your BCD hose for your low-pressure inflator, or if you're a dry suit diver, you can simply use your dry suit hose. So in this case, we're going to connect the dry suit hose. And just like that, the pod is connected. All we have to do now is turn on the flow rate to 15 liters a minute. And now you can hear that the air is starting to come through. And now we simply have to put the mask on, hopefully without knocking my glasses off this time. And now I am breathing enriched air at 15 liters per minute, waiting for the EMS to arrive on site. And if I needed a little bit more flow, then I could turn it up to 25 liters a minute. Just like that, pretty easy. And so if we just turn it off, we can disconnect it, take off the O2 hose, and now this can go back into my first aid kit, ready for the next time. But we hope there is no next time. Now we talk about scenario number 2. So same DCS situation, but I actually have access to pure O2. I always have my 40 cubic foot pony tank in the back of my truck just in case of emergencies, and I just need a way of figuring out how to connect the RescueAN pod to it. So just like before, we have a dry suit hose that is connected into the first stage. That actually connects into the pod just like we did last time, and the same thing applies for the O2 side into the free-flowing mask. Now it's just a matter of making sure the valve is on, okay? And we adjust it to the 15 liter a minute. And now I have access to pure O2. Again, we put the mask on. And now I am breathing pure O2 right away as soon as the DCS symptoms hit and while I'm waiting for EMS to come on site. This is about as good as I can do until the professionals show up. Once again, if I needed even higher flow rate, I would literally just switch that to 25 liters a minute, and now we get more O2 flowing in. It's that simple. We'll turn it off, disconnect the O2 side, back into the first aid kit, and we hope we never have to use it again. But if we do, we know it's there. So that's a couple of real-world demos using the RescueAN pod to show its value. Number one, if you've only got access to enriched air, use the pod to access it. Even better, if you've got access to 100% pure O2, then it really starts to show its value because you're saving precious time while you're waiting for EMS to arrive. I would argue that if you're doing local, deeper shore dives like we have here in the St. Lawrence, then probably having access to 100% O2 really makes sense. For me, the O2 tank is always in the back of my truck, just in case. And then that way, I can answer the question, what if? This was a beautiful dive day, mid-July, and I was getting to do a dive with my best dive buddies, Steph and Nat. And we decided we would do a shore dive out to the Kinghorn and back on our Liberty rebreathers. We have done this quite a few times before, so not a big deal. But it is a technical dive. And while I'm not going to argue that point today, because I know there are some folks out there who think that going out to the Kinghorn from shore is not a technical dive, that is a technical dive all day long. But let's stick to the game plan. So, it's a 90-minute dive. The Kinghorn, for those that don't know, is a glorious wreck that sits just off the shore of Rockport, Ontario. It's about a 20 to 25-minute swim to get out there, and it lies in about 85 feet of water. It's a little bit longer to come back due to the current, but all in all, this was somewhere in between an 80 to 90-minute dive. A little bit of deco, but not a ton, and it's a technical dive, and we had planned for this. All in all, I would say this was a textbook dive in terms of getting out there, going around the wreck a few times and doing the penetration, coming on back, following the deco timeline and the set points and everything that it took to sort of manage that technical dive. Did the deco commit? By the time I was back to the 20-foot mark on the wall, deco was clear, took a little bit extra time at the 10-foot level, had no issues coming back, surfaced, got all the gear off, and I noticed just a slight itch on my left shoulder. Nothing too crazy as I was getting out of my dry suit. Didn't really notice any sort of patch, but I did notice a bit of an itch. Didn't pay much attention to it, and we were going to go and do some dinner just after we got all our dive gear put away at one of the local pubs. So we ended up hitting the local pub, and probably about 15 minutes into sitting down, I could really start to feel the itch, and it was actually starting to spread. Now, I've had some skin bends in my time already, so I kind of said, oh, all right, I remember what this feels like. After checking in the bathroom in terms of the itch, I noticed some red splotches now starting to appear just in the fatty sections around my stomach, and mostly some in the chest. Nothing too crazy, but it was definitely starting to spread. And of course, this is something that divers don't really like to talk about, but I went back to the table and I told Steph and Nat, look, I am going to have to bypass the dinner, and I'm going to head on back to the truck because I knew I had O2 in the truck. And I sat there in the truck for about, look, I'm itching right now. It's making me itch. I sat in the truck for 15 to 20 minutes. I did call Dan, and Dan basically said, hey, it sounds like you have a minor skin bend sort of hit. You're on the O2. If it doesn't get any better, then you should seek medical help. So all that to say is I had the O2 tank in the truck. I deployed all the oxygen, and I sat in my truck, and I probably breathed on O2 for about 30 minutes. Of course, my 40 cubic foot tank of O2 was full, so I had tons of gas. And I sat there, and Steph and Nat came back out and supported and talked to me, and they did what great dive buddies would do. After about 30 minutes, all of the symptoms disappeared, and they never came back. But I always wondered after that incident, what if I didn't have that emergency oxygen available? What would have been my course of action? Was I calling 911? Would I have just tried to ignore it? I don't really know. But I know I was actually pretty happy knowing that not only did I have the O2 bottle in the back of the truck, but I knew how to deploy it, and I could get on it pretty quickly. And let me tell you, guaranteed at that moment in time, I was not thinking about what it cost to actually have that O2 pony sitting in the back of my truck. This really does matter because that's a local shore dive. And yes, it's out to 80, 85 feet. And yes, we were out there for a fair bit because we're on the rebreathers. In my mind, it's a textbook dive, but something still happened. Maybe I might have been underhydrated that day. Who knows? My conservatism was fairly conservative. But again, like I said, you just don't know. But what I did know was I had that tank of O2, I could use it, and it certainly helped clear up my symptoms within that 30 minutes. So is O2 important for local shore dives? In my mind, absolutely 1,000% yes, because you just don't know. And in this particular case, like I mentioned earlier, I was at least able to answer the question, what if? A few takeaways. If you can afford a $1,200 dive computer, then certainly you should be able to put together a basic emergency O2 plan, whether it's using the RescueAN O2 Pod, maybe it's the emergency O2 kit, maybe it's a 40 cubic foot of O2 sitting in the back of your truck. Whatever that is, what is your emergency O2 plan for the local shore dives that you are planning to do with you and your buddy? Next, DCS symptoms can be very subtle at first, and you may not even notice. But once they start, it could become a little bit of a runaway train that escalates into something very dangerous. So having that O2 plan and getting onto O2 as quick as you can could be the difference between short and long-term impact. So keep that in mind. Even if you don't buy an O2 kit when you're diving with your buddy, at least ask the question, hey, what if? What if we did have some sort of DCS event? How would we handle it? Here we are at the end of another 613 dive video, and this one has been a fun one to make. It's actually been sitting on my vision board for about 8 weeks, just because of my own personal experiences in terms of having to use O2. Last message is, of course, if you have found this message and the video and the content useful, then please take a moment, hit the like, give me a few comments, hit the subscribe button. That would be awesome. This is how the 613 Dive channel is going to continue to grow. But after all that's said and done, please practice hard and dive safe. Take care. Unconscious? What the hell is unconscious? Unconscious is not a word. You can't even make it a word. It's just not a word. I'm bloopering the bloopers. And I'm shooting this in the dive lab, and then of course someone's actually putting the garage door up beside me. So, you know what? We have middle class problems. Due to the physiological, wow, here we go. Slow down. I mean, what, you all hyped up? Let's just get through this. That. And now it's just a matter of putting on the mask. Wow, that was sketchy at best. Is this thing on?